A Belarusian activist has been found dead in neighbouring Ukraine a day after he was reported missing. Police say Vitaly Shishov was found hanged in a park near his home in the capital Kiev early on Tuesday. Shishov led an organisation that helps Belarusians fleeing persecution. Ukraine police have launched a murder inquiry. Well, for the latest, I'm now joined from Kiev by DW correspondent Nick Connolly. Nick, what more do we know so far?
Well, Shishov was last seen leaving his home about 9 a.m. local time yesterday, going out for a run, and after that his friends and colleagues were unable to reach him, tried to locate him based on mobile phone data. The mobile phone location tracking was switched off, and then this morning he was found hanged in a park. Reports coming in the last few hours in Ukrainian media even that there were signs of some kind of confrontation, that he'd had his nose broken. These are all unconfirmed, but reports that are circulating here in Ukraine. All in all, it's enough for the Ukrainian police to work on the assumption that this wasn't a suicide, that this was a murder disguised as suicide. As you mentioned there, Shishov was someone who helped Belarusians to leave their country for Ukraine. Ukraine is the easiest place for Belarusians fleeing Alexander Lukashenko to reach. They don't need a visa, it's cheaper, they can communicate in Russian here, and it really has become a hub for the Belarusian emigre community.
Well, can Belarusians in exile still feel safe?
Well, that's obviously the million-dollar question, especially given how much Belarusian oppositional life has now relocated to Kiev. Whole media organizations, political experts, pundits, political parties. We asked ourselves that question when Alexander Lukashenko forced that Ryanair plane back in May to land that was actually not heading to Belarus to get that opposition journalist off the plane. Back then, people felt very safe. They were convinced that the regime was only really looking for people who had yet to leave the country. That seems to be changing now. For now, obviously, people connected to Shishov are all pointing the finger at the Belarusian special services. They are convinced that it is Minsk that's behind this. Right now, it's too early to say. Some stories coming out here also from people who maybe were his political opponents in that Belarusian community here, saying there could have been potential other motives, ideological motives. But definitely you can really see that people are already changing their behavior and a lot less willing to talk to the press, a lot less willing to give their location when talking to the press because they don't feel 100% safe here in Kiev.
Nick, stay with us because this leads us to the case of the Belarusian sprinter Krystyna Tsimanovskaya. The athlete's been at the center of a political storm in Tokyo. She accused Belarusian officials of trying to force her to fly home against her will. She later found refuge at the Polish embassy. Her supporters say she will fly to Poland on Wednesday, where she's expected to apply for asylum. Here's our report.
Krystyna Tsimanovskaya had hoped to be making headlines running for Belarus in the 200-meter dash. Instead, she's in the news for a different reason. Krystyna Tsimanovskaya is in the Polish embassy, applying for a humanitarian visa. The procedure is ongoing. Ms. Tsimanovskaya is under the care of the Polish state. Tsimanovskaya says Belarusian officials attempted to forcibly deport her back to Minsk after she criticized her coaches. Team bosses blamed what they called her emotional and psychological condition for the decision.
I'm asking the International Olympic Committee for help. I'm being put under pressure to leave the country without my consent. I'm asking the IOC to intervene in this.
The attempted deportation has been condemned by many governments, including by the German government. We have often and clearly criticized the treatment of civil society in Belarus. In recent weeks, we have repeatedly seen harassment, persecution, and intimidation of independent media. And of course, athletes are not immune to this. We sharply condemn this. Security has been tightened around the Polish embassy in Japan. Diplomats have confirmed that Tsimanovskaya plans to fly to Poland in the coming days, joining other Belarusian opposition figures who have been forced to flee their homeland.
Now back to Nick Connolly in Kiev. Nick, how does this apparent killing, I have to say, of an opposition figure tie in with this Belarusian sprinter applying for asylum in Poland now?
Well, I don't think there's any direct connection. Indeed, we've heard from people around Shishov that he had been getting increasing threats and tip-offs about his safety in recent weeks, way before this defection, as it were, of Krystyna Tymanovskaya in Tokyo. But I think it shows that almost a year now, the anniversary is next Monday, of Belarus's rigged election. This is not over. On the one hand, the opposition here that has left the country, Belarusian opposition that's now in Kiev and in other European cities, has not given up. Alexander Lukashenko hasn't been able to silence those critics, and even people who, as it were pretty privileged within the Belarusian system, like the athletes. Sport is a big deal in Belarus. Alexander Lukashenko is head of the Olympic Committee. So people like Tymanovskaya are not willing to keep quiet, not willing to do as they're told. And in a situation of kind of raised tensions where Belarus is coming under sanctions, under all kinds of pressure, these kind of overreactions, as with Tymanovskaya, are going to happen more and more. And this kind of unexpected outcome of something that maybe started with a small conflict with an Olympic team having much, much bigger ramifications. So a year after those elections, this situation isn't over, and Alexander Lukashenko isn't as comfortable in a position of comfort and kind of certainty as maybe he'd hoped to be.
DW's Nick Connolly from Kiev. Thank you, Nick.